The attic always smelled of yesterday's rain, a dampness woven into cardboard and cloth, as if the roof kept swallowing storms and never quite forgot the taste. I climbed there on Saturdays when the house felt too crowded with unspoken sentences. Mother cooked downstairs with the radio tuned to stations no one requested. Each song tried to outsing the hiss of boiling water, but grief has perfect pitch and always finds the key. I was 10 the afternoon I pried open the cedar trunk at the rafter's apex, a relic she called just college things. Whenever I tugged at its latch, the lock had rusted to the delicacy of lace. One breath and it surrendered. Inside lay sweaters that still whispered of cigarette halls and cheap perfume, a stack of sketchbooks bleached at the corners, and on top, a school notebook wrapped in twine the color of dried blood. Its cover bore the print of a wooden ruler, centimeters ghosted left of inches, the way bilingual children dream in 2 alphabets at once. I untied the knot, expecting equations. Mother had spoken of math, the way others spoke of prayer, insisting numbers were the only language earth and sky both understood. But the first page offered no fractions, only a single line in ink gone sepia, for the man time miscounted. The handwriting startled me, slanted, urgent, an older version of her grocery lists, but missing the exhaustion that now dragged at her whys. I flipped another sheet, and another, page upon page of poems, each a bruise folded into stanza, no titles, no dates, only a silent numbering in the upper right corner, as if she'd been indexing sorrow for future audit. Across the margin marched faint blue grids, imprisoning lines that fought to breathe beyond them. I told myself I would read one, just one, then close the cover before the attic's dust inhaled my lungs. But grief is a slow contagion. Once it recognizes a warm host, it travels with deliberation. I read until sunset fractured between the boards, sashaying gold across the pages like hesitant applause. Stanza after stanza conjured a man I barely remembered. My father, sketched in metaphors of missing furniture and doors left ajar. She never named him outright. Instead, she called him the geometry of absence, the sum that refused the equal sign, my favorite unsolved proof. One poem described sleep as the quotient of 2 silhouettes on opposite sides of dawn. Another confessed, I learned to fold silence into origami birds so our child might mistake them for lullabies. My chest tightened with a curious, lawless empathy. I was reading Mother before she was Mother, before obligation replaced possibility. She wrote like someone who believed words could negotiate with the void, perhaps even invoice it back to fullness. Yet every metaphor recoiled at its own courage, ending in a little collapse of ink that resembled my father's footstep fading down a corridor. I do not recall, but sometimes dream. On the final page, she'd drawn a simple ruler, 12 centimeters. Yet the numbers dissolved after 9, the last 3 left blank, as though awaiting a hand that never returned to measure. Beneath it, she wrote, if you ever come back, bring an eraser big enough for chronology. A floorboard creaked below. I snapped the notebook shut, breath sugar sharp in my throat. Mother called my name once, then again, each syllable carrying the weary elasticity of a rubber band stretched one pull from breaking. I tucked the notebook under my shirt, its cardboard corners pressed against my ribs like a second, paper-thin heart. At dinner, I watched her fingers choreograph around cutlery, confident from years of feeding absence, but I noticed her ring finger bore a faint pale band where metal used to live. I tasted rust in the soup. I wondered if she measured grief in teaspoons, if the salty broth was an equation meant to balance the day. She asked about homework. I lied about fractions, answering in fractions. That night, I lay in bed tracing the notebook's edge beneath my pillow, its ruler imprint catching the lamp's stray glow. I imagined my father somewhere measuring distances he never intended to return across, adding up motel ceilings, subtracting reasons. Each subtraction, another poem unsent. What happens to words denied their destination? Do they calcify into bone, or hover like unclaimed mail in the mouth of God? Sleep thinned. The air tasted of graphite and nostalgia. I heard Mother moving down the hall, her steps a metronome set to a song she refused to hum. For a moment I pictured carrying the notebook to her room, opening it between us like a surrender flag. But children are born diplomats of adult sorrow. We know when a treaty cannot yet be signed. Instead, I pressed the cover to my cheek and whispered to the impression of that ruler, teach me how to measure what can't be spoken. Outside, the moon draped itself over the roof like white gauze, trying to staunch a wound it could not see. I closed my eyes and felt poems rustling in the dark, seeking an exit, seeking a voice, seeking a child who might one day translate them back into numbers, because numbers, Mother said, never lie. Yet here they lay, silent witnesses to the longest uncalculated year of her life. Space. If someone you love writes their grief in a language you were never taught, do you learn the alphabet, Or do you invent a new one so you can read each other without speaking? Morning light in our house does not arrive all at once. It inches down the hallway like a too-shy substitute teacher, pausing at each family photograph as if to verify attendance. The frames hold only two faces. Mother's half-smile twice over, once at 18 in a borrowed graduation gown, and again at 25, swollen with me and the future both. But the light hesitates anyway, unsure which version to greet. I watch that uncertainty every dawn from the threshold of my bedroom, clutching the notebook with its ruler on the cover beneath my pajama top, a contraband heartbeat that thumps against my ribs. Mother's weekday ritual is as precise as a metronome, kettle on at 6:02, coffee grounds measured to the gram, news radio murmuring the world's latest betrayals in the background. She eats one soft-boiled egg, sliced into eighths the way her own mother taught her, then irons her blouse with the diligence of someone erasing yesterday's wrinkles from more than fabric. When she speaks to me across the kitchen table, her words feel pre-checked, run through an invisible spell checker that deletes longing, anger, or any mention of him. Only the safe nouns remain: homework, lunch money, temperatures, yet silence bulges behind her syllables like water pressing at a dam. I have begun cataloguing those silences the way she once catalogued poems. 7:13 a.m., 3-second pause after the word forecast, possible rainfall inside her throat. Or 7:45 a.m., spoon clinks cup, little tremor equal to half the circumference of regret. Math, she said, never lies, but it does know how to keep secrets. At school, the notebook stays hidden in the mesh pocket of my backpack, ruler edge imprint ghosting through the nylon. Our classroom smells of disinfectant and pencil shavings, but when I slide my hand across that spine, I catch the attic's dust, the murmur of unsent stanzas. Mrs. Delgado teaches long division as if peeling an orange. One spiral strip, no breaks. I should be listening. Numbers were supposed to be our family's common tongue, but the moment her chalk begins its squeak, lines from Mother's notebook flare inside my skull. When you left, the calendar started counting by prime numbers. Every day divisible, only by loneliness and one other ache. The imagery stings like citrus in a paper cut. I copy the line into my margin in microscript, disguising poetry as scratchwork. A friend beside me asks if I need help with remainders. I shake my head, though remainders are all I see. Shreds of my mother's heart, remaindered on ruled pages she never mailed. After the last bell, I circle the playground before heading home, stalling for courage. Our town is small enough that rumors never get a chance to cool. Everyone knows everyone else's missing fathers by their first names. Sometimes I imagine mine leaning against a mailbox on the other side of the planet, pockets stuffed with letters stamped "Return to Sender," unable to choose which apology to deliver. In these daydreams, his face is always smudged, like a photograph handled too often. Inside our living room, the afternoon sun grids itself across the carpet, parallelograms of gold, faint replicas of the notebook's graph lines. Mother sits on the sofa, grading student exams. Red pen ticks beside wrong answers, a neat wound in every margin. "You're quiet today," she notes without looking up. "I'm studying," I answer, and it isn't entirely a lie. I slip the notebook onto my lap beneath a textbook, turn to a fresh poem numbered 42. It begins mid-sentence. "Your side of the bed became the equator. I slept above it, afraid to cross hemispheres of blame." I wonder how many equators can exist in one small bedroom. How many fault lines in a single heart. Mother's eyes lift briefly from her grading. For a pulse of a moment she looks at me, as though she's heard the poem through the still air, as though words can tunnel past covers and caution. Then the moment shutters. Red ink continues its patient devastation across poorly calculated fractions. Later, when she steps out to collect laundry, I dare open conversation with the ghosts. I press my palm to the page and whisper, "Where are you now?" expecting no reply. Yet the paper seems warmer beneath my skin, as if retaining the heat of the attic or the pulse of the hand that wrote it decades earlier. I imagine my father reading these poems somewhere they never arrived, and the picture is unbearable, an address scrawled wrong by one digit, a mailbox rusted shut. At dinner, I test the perimeter of our silence. "Did you ever like writing?" I ask, voice casual as I can manage while piercing a boiled potato. Mother's fork stops mid-air, a shadow thin as a second hand on a clock passes across her face.
"Writing what?"
She probes, tone measured. "Anything." I shrug. "Stories, poems." I wait for recognition, for a tremor of memory. Instead, she chews thoughtfully, swallows and answers. Words are slippery, numbers stay put, a verdict rendered, conversation moves on, but her eyes refuse their usual downcast. They hold me a half-second too long, questions flickering behind them like lightning that never quite finds a strike. Night folds around the house. In my room, the notebook rests open on my desk. under a lamp's circle of interrogation. I copy one entire stanza into my math workbook, replacing nouns with variables so no one will know. A. The echo to left in B's doorway. C. Decaying bedsheets adjusted for one missing integer. I solve for loneliness, and the equation breaks into non-numbers. Teardrops on squared paper. Down the hall I hear mother moving in her bedroom. A drawer opens, then closes with hesitant dignity. If I close my eyes, I can picture her lifting the quilt she stitched during pregnancy, fingering the place where my father's name would have been embroidered had he stayed. Perhaps she finally senses one artifact missing from the attic, a phantom weight in the cedar trunk. The ruler notebook has left a measurable void. I brace for confrontation, but none comes. Instead, footsteps approach my door, soft, sock-muffled, stopping just shy of the threshold. There is a hush, then the click of her turning away. The hallway light extinguishes. We retreat into our separate numeric universes, each counting breaths, losses, possibilities. I lay awake composing my own secret arithmetic. If one unsent poem weighs X grief units, and the notebook contains Y poems, then how many units of unheard sorrow rest between us? No teacher has issued that homework yet. Outside, rain begins its sideways applause on the roof, each drop a decimal in the long division of night. I imagine mother at her window, listening, wondering which proof left unsolved allowed weather to seep through every unspoken place. I wonder if tomorrow she will open the attic and find the empty space where silence used to live, measured precisely by a ruler embossed on cardboard. When the metrics of love no longer add up, do we change the variables or learn to live inside an equation that refuses to balance? It began with a substitute teacher and a square of late winter light slanting across the chalkboard, the kind that makes dust look like snowfall trapped in a snow globe. Mrs. Delgado's mother had slipped on ice, they said, so a young man named Mr. Givens, still smelling faintly of campus laundry soap, took attendance in a voice unused to silence. His briefcase spilled worksheets dotted by tiny, eager hundred signs, but the copier jammed, and suddenly our lesson plan dissolved into free time for quiet reading. I tried to lose myself in a library paperback about volcanoes, yet the notebook, hidden between science pages like a stowaway, vibrated with unspent voltage, its cardboard ruler pressed into my thigh, every centimeter a heartbeat. My volcano book spoke of magma that waits centuries for a fault line to unlock it. I knew something about waiting faults. Mr. Givens' pace rose, curious about our chosen texts. When he paused beside me, I panicked, snapping the notebook shut inside the paperback. He asked what fascinated me about volcanology. I murmured, pressure, and he laughed softly, unaware how punctured the word felt in my mouth. Care to share a fact with the class, he offered. My classmates looked up 30 eyes, all decimals in search of a hole. Against reason, the attic poems flooded forward, molten and bright. My hand rose before permission, and I recited, not a fact but Mother's stanza 43, the one about bedsheets and hemispheres, swapping bed for crust, hemispheres for plates. Laughter rippled, subdued yet genuine. The imagery worked. Mr. Givens applauded, impressed. He never saw the grid-lined ghost behind my words. At recess, Kiera, whose ponytail always smelled of strawberry erasers, tugged my sleeve. That line was pretty, she said. Where'd you read it? An ache, narrow and surgical, slipped beneath my ribs. I shrugged, then fled to the tetherball pole, its chain thrashing in wind like punctuation gone rogue. The rumor seed sprouted by afternoon. 3 desks over, Marcus whispered Mother's phrase about prime-numbered days as though tasting cinnamon. By dismissal, it traveled faster than fractions. A poem with no author, crisp as new chalk, circulating like contraband wonder. The hallway echoed with boot squeaks and recitations half-remembered. Each echo felt like a fingerprint wetly pressed onto glass only Mother and I could see. I walked home under skies the color of unwritten pages, backpack heavier from guilt than textbooks. At the door I smelled something burning, not dinner, but paper singed. Mother stood at the kitchen counter over a battered saucepan in which she sometimes sterilized canning lids. A charred scrap curled in tongs above the steam, lines of sepia ink disintegrated mid-air. My chest hollowed. The cedar trunk must have whispered during her lunch break. The attic's silence had been audited and found wanting. She turned. Her eyes, red-rimmed yet arid, skipped accusation and landed in territory far more dangerous, understanding. Did you read them? Her voice barely skimmed the surface of sound. I nodded, throat gravel dry. She released the scrap. It drifted like a dying moth into the sink. They were never meant for anyone. She folded the tongs with a click, loud as gunfire. Especially not you. Wind rattled the window pane. A polite knock from weather begging entrance. I wanted to speak the new arithmetic, that poems divided sorrow into fractions small enough for two to carry. But words jammed like copier gears. I managed only, they're beautiful. Beauty isn't always benign, she said, wiping steam from her glasses. It can cauterize. Her gaze shifted to the backpack bulging at my side, and I felt every clandestine centimeter of the ruler notebook glow reddening through fabric. Before she could ask, I opened the flap, withdrew the hostage artifact, and placed it on the table. She didn't reach for it. Instead, she reached for the ruler imprint, index finger tracing the ridged cardboard as if confirming the object's pulse. A tremor ran from her nail to elbow, subtle yet seismic, the pre-quake shiver of foundation adjusting. I wrote those before I knew what leaving really meant, she whispered. I thought language could draft him back, the way engineers draft bridges out of air. She exhaled, shaky. When it failed, I buried the blueprints. Silence pooled, thick as cooled lava. Somewhere a pot hissed on the stove, releasing the scent of cumin and regret. I swallowed and said, in class they thought your lines were science facts. They fit. A fragile laugh escaped her, brittle but genuine, as if exhaustion had let slip the latch on a birdcage inside her chest. Maybe grief and geology share a curriculum, she murmured. Faults, pressure, eruptions no one schedules. Then, unexpected, she slid the notebook toward me. Keep it, she decided, voice steadying. If I burn it, the silence wins. But promise me something. Her eyes locked mine, fierce as algebraic proofs. Promise you'll measure the distance between truth and invention before you lend these words your mouth. Poetry is flammable. Handle it like fire near dry fields. I promised, though neither of us yet knew how combustible tomorrow would be. That night, homework spread across my desk like debris after storm, fractions blurred into enjambments. Mother sat opposite, helping balance equations, red pen traded for mechanical pencil. Each time her sleeve brushed notebook cardboard, I felt aftershocks. At one point, her hand paused above a stanza numbered 52, a confession about singing lullabies to an empty crib the week after he left. She inhaled sharply, but instead of closing the page, she adjusted her glasses and kept explaining least common denominators, her finger tapping rhythms onto grief she'd ceased to hide. Later, when moonlight braided through blinds, I reopened 52, and beneath her original lines added one of my own. First poem I ever dared write. If silence could learn to count, would it stop accumulating in corners? Or would it finally name the sum of everything lost? I didn't erase my childish loops. I wanted her to find them someday. Proof that heat doesn't only destroy paper, it welds margins into continuations neither author could compose alone. Outside, the radio towers blinked red across the night like punctuation marks warning airplanes of invisible mountains. I drifted to sleep, hearing Mother close her bedroom door without locking it for the first time in years.
Fun questions, Kinsella.
When a hidden stanza escapes into other hearts and refuses to return, do we chase it back into secrecy or follow its trajectory and discover the new language it has already begun to teach? Monday dawned the color of unsharpened pencils, dull graphite sky smearing across rooftops, and by first bell the rumor had already outrun the wind. Someone had slipped a photocopied poem into every locker, its toner granules still gritty like wet sand. Your absence keeps time in the kitchen. Measuring water for two, pouring for one. No byline, no context, just the small, spidery asterisk Mother used to mark revisions. The halls buzzed with speculation. Our school was too small to keep secrets, too bored to leave them alone. A few kids recited the lines in mock swoony voices, but most held the page as if it might start bleeding. Poetry, once feral and private, had turned carnivorous. In homeroom, Mr. Givens, back as the official long-term sub now, held up a sheet and asked if anyone could explain its origin. I heard my pulse before I heard his question. 30 heads pivoted like compass needles hunting north. Marcus winked. He'd guessed I was the source. I swallowed a rust-tasting silence. Givens' gaze paused on me. Gentle, but surgical. Great work, he said, misreading the static in my eyes for pride. If you're sharing more, credit matters. He moved on to attendance, yet the room kept orbiting around the poem's gravity, and I felt the floorboards give a fractional sigh, as if the building understood load-bearing better than I. The slide rule of shame. By lunchtime, the poem was taped above the drinking fountain, scribbled onto binder covers, texted as dare or confession. Each repetition sanded away context until only the wound remained, gleaming, ownerless. Kira cornered me, near the bikes. It's yours, right? Don't worry, people love it. Her encouragement felt like a bandage placed on someone else's bruise. That evening I found Mother at the kitchen table leafing through the notebook. She'd penciled check marks beside certain stanzas, circled verbs as if regrading her own heart. The photocopy lay between us, its edges wilted from too many hands. I didn't share it, I blurted, voice shrill as chalk on glass. She looked up, neither accusation nor absolution, only bone-deep fatigue. Grief sneaks out the door you guard the least, she murmured. Maybe mine chose yours. I trembled, half resenting the metaphor. They think I wrote it. They're calling me. I couldn't finish. The label poet felt hot, ill-fitting, bordering on theft. Mother traced the hovering ruler, embossed on the cover. Perhaps you're co-author now, she said, sorrow softening to something stranger. Permission. But another sound emerged, the crack of math homework undone. Future points deducted. My world measured value in test scores, not metaphors. Poetry was extra credit no one asked for. Fault lines under hallway tiles. Wednesday, the principal announced a District Youth Voices showcase. Our poem, he explained, had inspired the event. Givens entered me without consent, quoting the doctrine of teachable moments. Applause followed like rain-wet newspaper against windows, loud, flimsy, inky. I considered refusing, but refusal felt like signing away a limb someone else already grafted to me. That night, I dreamt of standing at a lectern while the notebook dissolved into snowfall around my feet, each flake a stanza that melted before I could pronounce it. Mother found me at dawn curled beside the laundry basket, notebook clutched like a life preserver. She brewed tea strong enough to stain the mug's ancestry and said, "We could write something together, something new." Her voice wavered at new, as though the word were a rope spanning a ravine. We sat at the table. She slid me a sheet of graph paper. The grids felt suddenly comforting, tiny cages ready to keep words from bolting. Yet every time I lifted the pen, my brain translated feelings into fractions, fear into decimals. Across from me, Mother stared at the blank page, knuckles whitening. 2 authors, 1 silence. Finally, I spoke first line aloud. Heartbeat equals distance over time. She breathed the next. Distance equals love divided by the speed of leaving. We alternated, building a theorem of ache, numbers mutating into imagery until equation and elegy became indistinguishable. When we finished, the page looked less like homework, more like a weather map of our family. Pressure systems colliding, isobars spiraling. The showcase, Friday night. Auditorium lights jittered like anxious fireflies. I fidgeted backstage, clutching the graph paper poem, palms damp enough to smear ink. Mother sat in the 3rd row, face half lit, half shadowed. Audience and accomplice both. When my name echoed off velvet curtains, I walked into glare. A hush landed, a soft, heavy snowfall of expectation. Words trembled on the paper, but my mouth refused them, stalled by the realization that poetry spoken aloud no longer belonged to us. It would fracture into every listening ear, changing shape beyond recall. I looked toward Mother. She nodded. Not a push, but an opening door. Breath steadied. I read. Our composite poem unfolded. Variables morphing into rivers, remainders into constellations, silence into a ruler, measuring the length of moonlight across an empty pillow. Gasps scattered. When I finished, applause wove itself through theater dust, like golden thread pulling 2 disparate fabrics together. Aftermath variable. Backstage, students flooded me with questions about technique, symbolism, pain. I answered clumsily, like describing a dream at midday. Outside, Mother waited under a street lamp, notebook pressed to her chest. She didn't speak, only opened the cover and slid our new poem inside, page 53. The ruler on the cardboard seemed to glow, as if gaining an extra centimeter. Walking home, snow stitched the night into a softer silence. I asked, "Are we in trouble with math now?" She smiled, tears bright and cold. "Math has always wanted a sibling," she said. "Tonight we introduced them." We passed the post office, its drop box yawning like a blue mouth hungry for confession. Mother paused. From her coat she drew a single envelope, addressed but unstamped. The handwriting matched the notebook's earliest lines. She whispered, "I kept 1 poem back, his favorite. Maybe equations alone won't reach him." She let me slit the envelope inside. The metal thunk sounded definitive yet airy, like balancing an equation long suspected impossible. Snow kept falling, erasing footprints almost before we made them. I thought of magma waiting centuries, of rulers ending at 9, of margins ripped to make space for new graphs. Somewhere a volcano sleeps under mathematics, awaiting a small necessary fracture. If grief learns to speak in both numbers and verse, Which tongue will carry farther across the fault line between what we've lost and what we still dare to make? Winter sputtered into March the way a record needle skitters across the last groove worn reluctant to lift. The streets thawed in mismatched patches. Asphalt freckled like a half-remembered constellation, while our mailbox, red paint chipped to primer, swelled with catalogues reminding us what we did not need. One grey Tuesday, an envelope perched among them like a sparrow in a cage of junk. No logo, no window, just our address in a hand. I had never seen but instantly knew the slanted urgency of the notebook's earliest pages, slowed now by years or miles. The postmark blurred, rain-licked, but the state abbreviation was wrong for anywhere my father might plausibly be. Time again, miscounting. Mother read the return name once, twice, lips shaping silence. Then she set the letter on the kitchen counter unopened, deliberate, as if to ask whether messages mature in darkness the way seeds do. For 3 days it lay there, a small geographic crisis between toaster and kettle. We orbited it in polite ellipses, discussing quizzes, bus delays, the price of strawberries. Every topic bent gravity-like toward the envelope's white dwarf. On the 4th evening, she slid it across the table to me. "Numbers or words?" she asked. "Which will you trust to open this?" I said both, but meant neither. Still, my fingers breached the glue. Inside, one sheet, ruled, torn from a hotel pad. A ruler print faintly visible on its reverse. The same ghosted centimeters. The note was brief. I left thinking distance could subtract damage. Years proved the equation flawed. If remnants remain, measure nothing with regret. I am not asking return, only remainder. No apology, no forwarding contact. A proof sketched in absence. I expected Mother to crumble or flame, but she exhaled, long unbroken as though releasing a number too large to store in memory. Then she reached for the notebook, found an empty graph page, and copied the lines in pencil. Beneath them she drew a bracket, writing, "Supplementary angle, ourselves." That night she brought down 2 cardboard boxes from the attic. One of my father's old calculus texts, yellow paper stacks with marginalia, and her cedar trunk, now unlocked. "Archives," she said, handing me a pad of post-its. "Label what should stay and what should be transposed." We worked side by side until midnight, cataloguing grief like librarians of a long-burned wing. Whenever we disagreed on an item's fate, we performed the new family ritual. She framed the question in verse. I replied in equation. If poem and proof converged within the margin, the object found a place on the keep shelf. If not, it was thanked and set by the door for tomorrow's donation truck. At 2 a.m., we discovered the last untitled stanza tucked behind the trunk's false bottom. "There is a room inside night where even pulse forgets arithmetic. Meet me there. Bring no measuring tape, only the silence we promised never to share." Mother held the page to the lamp until it glowed. I watched the shadow of her thumb tremble across the grid like a seismograph finally acknowledging the quake. She didn't burn this one, she folded it into my palm. "Your draft now," she said. "Find its next line." Later, I brought the stanza to my desk and wrote beneath it, "If 2 shadows overlap, the darker outline is not loss, but evidence of bodies learning how to occupy the same light." I left the page on Mother's pillow, the ruler notebook peeking from beneath the quilt like a bookmark in the night. The math department's end-of-year banquet unfolds in the gymnasium beneath garlands of crepe paper and helium balloons shaped like numerals trying to flee the ceiling. A banner announces "Celebrate the count," 2 exclamation points bracketing the sentiment like anxious parents on the first day of school. Mother and I sit at a round table that smells of vanilla sheet cake and floor wax, the notebook resting between us like an honored but unpredictable guest. Principal Alvarez strides to the microphone, thanks the volunteers, and then unexpectedly invites us forward to close the evening in whatever language numbers might dream. On stage we do not read, instead we demonstrate a proof. Mother chalks an empty rectangle, length L, width W. I recite stanza 59. There is a room so small even echoes fold in half. Yet grief still finds room to pace. I draw the diagonal D and label it father. Mother writes beneath, "L cred, blut W cred, D cred," and adds, "Loss squared is not the same as loss doubled." Mother closes the notebook with a soft thump. We leave the stage to a low hum, more honest than applause. Unfinished proofs. June evenings stretch elastic. We rig a backyard clothesline and pin index cards, numbers on one side, poems on the other. Neighbors add their own, and the line sags under anonymous equations and confessions. After a rainstorm, the ink beads into watercolor galaxies, but the paper holds. A mailman pins a receipt asking how many porch-to-curb steps equal half a stride of regret. I answer, "Try barefoot." The equation changes when the ground forgives. The neighborhood adopts our line. Wednesdays become new variable day. Full moons require haiku. Blueprints mix with elegies. The return point. A July postcard shows a desert highway and reads, "Coordinates drift, but the midpoint misses you." We plot the GPS stamp to a diner near Santa Rosa, New Mexico, and drive 2 days to reach it. A waitress gives mother a slim parcel, a handmade 13-inch ruler, inscription burned along its edge. For the space after goodbye, so nothing feels short. Back home, we mount the ruler above the clothesline like an exclamation point stretched thin. It doesn't match any unit we know, we say. It measures the part of the story that doesn't fit. Divergent series. On the eve of the new school year, I dream of endless grids, decimals pulsing .333. If 0 is silence and 1 is speech, live in the interval between the uncountable set where echoes choose their own names. I leave the line unfinished, ruler balanced across the top margin. Downstairs, mother's kettle sings in a register between note and number. We sip, measure nothing, allow everything. The 13-inch ruler guards the horizon. Index cards sway, and somewhere beyond the window, the rest of the stanza approaches, barefoot, unhurried, carrying a ruler whose end we cannot see.